The girl's fingers twitched for the first time in years, just barely, as tears slid down her cheeks. The room went silent. A man who had nothing to give stood frozen beside her wheelchair, his voice still trembling from the words he had whispered moments before. No one understood how they had reached this moment, or what it would cost after. Before we go any further, if stories like this remind you that kindness still exists in the world, consider subscribing to Kindness Tales. Share this video with someone who could use hope today, and tell us in the comments what small act of kindness has stayed with you. Now let me tell you how all of this began. It started in a city where glass buildings scraped the sky and success was measured in boardrooms and stock prices. The CEO lived at the top of that world, running a powerful company, commanding respect with a single glance. But behind the tinted windows of his luxury SUV and the guarded gates of his home, there was a silence that money couldn't fill. His teenage daughter had been paralyzed in an accident years earlier. One careless moment, one shattered intersection, and everything changed. She had once been unstoppable. Soccer practices after school, laughter echoing through the house, music blasting from her room while she danced barefoot on the carpet. After the accident, the house grew quiet. The trophies gathered dust. Her wheelchair became part of the furniture, and her smile slowly faded into something polite and practiced. Doctors tried everything: physical therapy, experimental treatments, private specialists flown in from across the country. Nothing brought back what she had lost. The CEO threw himself into work, partly because he didn't know how to fix what mattered most. He built bigger offices, closed bigger deals, donated large checks to charities related to spinal injuries. People praised his generosity. But at home, his daughter stared out the window for hours, watching other kids walk past the house on their way to school. She stopped believing in miracles long before her father did. Across town, in a small rented apartment near a noisy highway, a single dad lived a very different life. His days were a careful balancing act of construction shifts, school drop-offs, and packing lunches at dawn. His young son was his whole world, and every dollar was accounted for before it ever reached his wallet. He carried exhaustion in his shoulders and hope in his eyes, the kind of hope that comes from having no choice but to keep going. Their lives were never meant to cross. But one rainy afternoon, fate ignored that plan. The CEO's daughter had insisted on leaving the house for once. A new rehabilitation center had opened nearby, and though she didn't expect much, she wanted a change of scenery. Her father agreed instantly, canceling meetings to drive her himself. The rain turned streets slick and gray, blurring the city into streaks of light. When traffic came to a sudden stop near a bus shelter, the CEO noticed a man struggling to hold an umbrella over a small boy while adjusting a crutch under his arm. The man's shoe had split at the sole, flapping uselessly with every step. The boy laughed anyway, unfazed by the rain. The daughter noticed them too. She couldn't look away. Something about the way the man smiled at his son, despite the obvious struggle, pulled at her. She asked her father to stop the car. Confused but curious, he pulled over. The single dad was startled when the luxury vehicle rolled down its window. He tensed, expecting a complaint or a warning. Instead, the daughter leaned forward and asked if they were okay. Her voice was soft but direct. The man nodded, embarrassed, and explained that the bus was late and they were headed to a physical therapy appointment for his injured leg. He'd been hit by a car months earlier and never fully recovered, but missing work wasn't an option. His son squeezed his hand, as if reminding him not to apologize. Without thinking, the daughter asked if they wanted a ride. Her father hesitated. This wasn't how his world worked, but something in her eyes stopped him. They helped the man and his son into the back seat, water dripping onto expensive leather. No one complained. During the drive, the single dad talked about his son's love for science and how he dreamed of becoming an engineer. He talked about the long nights and the fear of falling behind on rent. He didn't speak with bitterness, just honesty. The daughter listened, truly listened, for the first time in years. When they arrived at the rehab center, the man thanked them and struggled to get out of the car. The daughter watched as he winced, clearly in pain. On impulse, she asked why he kept pushing so hard. He looked at her wheelchair, then at her face, and said quietly that giving up was a luxury he couldn't afford. His son needed him. Even broken, even tired, he had to keep showing up. Those words followed her long after they drove away. Over the next weeks, the daughter asked about him more than once. The CEO, intrigued and slightly unsettled, had his assistant look into the man's situation. What he found was humbling. No debt forgiveness, no secret trust fund, no dramatic rescue story. Just a good man doing his best with very little. Against his better judgment, the CEO arranged for them to meet again, this time at the rehab center. The single dad didn't know why he'd been invited. He wore his cleanest shirt, hands rough and nervous. During that visit, the daughter asked if he would talk to her during her therapy sessions, not as a trainer or a doctor, but just as someone who understood pain and persistence. He didn't feel qualified, but he agreed. Day after day, he showed up after work, sometimes still in dusty boots, sitting beside her wheelchair and talking. He told stories about his son, about days when everything went wrong, and he kept moving anyway. He never told her to believe in miracles. He never promised she would walk again. He only reminded her that she still mattered, exactly as she was. One evening, after a particularly brutal session that left her exhausted and angry, she broke down. She told him she felt useless, a burden, invisible. He leaned closer and whispered that he would help her, not by fixing her legs, but by reminding her of her strength when she forgot it. He said pain didn't get to decide her worth. Something shifted after that. She began to try again, not because she expected a miracle, but because someone believed her effort mattered. The therapist noticed small changes, improved posture, longer focus, a spark returning to her eyes. Her father watched it all with a mixture of gratitude and guilt. He had spent years throwing money at the problem, while this man gave time, presence, and honesty. Eventually, the CEO offered to pay him. The single dad refused. He said some things shouldn't be bought. Months passed. Progress was slow but real. Then one afternoon, during a routine exercise, the daughter felt something unfamiliar, not pain, not frustration, sensation, just enough to make her gasp. Her fingers moved barely but unmistakably. That was the moment when the room went silent. The moment from the beginning of this story. Doctors rushed in. Tests were run. Nothing was promised, but something had changed. Hope, fragile but alive, returned. The CEO broke down later that night, alone in his office. He realized that kindness hadn't come from power or wealth, but from a man who knew how to show up even when life was unfair. He quietly paid off the single dad's medical bills anyway, set up a college fund for his son, and offered him a job that fit his skills and allowed him to be present as a father. The man accepted, not as charity but as partnership. The daughter continued therapy, stronger in spirit, regardless of what her body would ultimately do. She volunteered at the rehab center, talking to others who felt forgotten. She told them about the man who taught her that hope didn't need guarantees. Years later, people still talk about the CEO's success. Fewer know about the moment his world truly changed. When kindness entered through the back seat of a car on a rainy afternoon. In the end, this story isn't about walking again or dramatic transformations. It's about what happens when one person chooses to care without conditions. The single dad didn't save the girl with money or medicine. He saved her by seeing her, by staying, by whispering words that carried more weight than he ever knew. And that kind of kindness doesn't just change one life. It echoes outward, reminding us all that even the smallest human connection can become the turning point someone else has been waiting for. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and tell us in the comments about a time when kindness changed your life.